The door slammed on the billionaire. 3 years later, he met the children he never knew existed. Subscribe now. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our gripping stories. And if this tale of betrayal and redemption resonates with you, give it a thumbs up. Your support means the world. She slammed the door on the billionaire who betrayed her. 3 years later, he met the children he never knew existed. What would you do if the man you loved, the father of your unborn children, was seen laughing with another woman just moments before you were about to reveal your biggest secret? Get ready, because Olivia's world was about to shatter, only to be rebuilt with a strength she never knew she possessed. Olivia Hayes didn't remember how she got from the restaurant to Liam Thorne's penthouse in London. Her heart hammered so violently she felt it might shatter her ribs from the inside. Her hands trembled, still clenched from what she had just seen. Liam, seated at a candlelit table across from a stunning brunette, laughing in the same easy way he used to laugh with Olivia. He hadn't noticed her standing across the street. Or perhaps he had, and chose not to react. That hurt more than the image itself. It wasn't the woman that tore her apart. It was the familiarity, the comfort, the moment. Olivia had just found the courage to tell him about the baby. Their baby. She'd rehearsed the moment in her head all day, imagined every version of how it might go. She never imagined she'd see him with someone else first. By the time she reached the penthouse, which they had once shared, all that remained of her composure was rage held together by anguish. Liam opened the door with a relaxed smile, still in his impeccable shirt and blazer, expecting nothing unusual. His expression changed the moment he saw her face. "I saw you with her," Olivia said, her voice cold, quiet, definitive. Liam blinked, stunned. "Wait, Olivia, it's not what you think." But she was already backing away, one protective hand over her stomach, the other gripping the door. He reached out, but she slammed it shut before he could say another word. The echo of the slammed door between them was louder than anything they could have said. In that moment, something inside her broke, but something else hardened. Olivia had always been forgiving, always soft, always understanding. But this was a line she could not uncross. She had trusted Liam Thorne, the golden boy of the tech world, the charming CEO with ice blue eyes and an ambition bigger than any skyscraper. She had believed he saw her not just as temporary, but as real. She had been wrong. That night, Olivia didn't cry. At first, she packed a suitcase with trembling hands, left her keys on the counter, and walked out into the city with only a child growing inside her and a future she'd have to build alone. It was raining. She didn't flee the rain. She let it soak her through. By morning, she was on a train north, far from London, from the cameras, from Liam's multi-billion-pound empire. She found a small town a few counties away, quiet, slow, safe. She rented a modest cottage with peeling paint and an overgrown garden. The landlord didn't ask too many questions. That was good, because she didn't have many answers. Her pregnancy passed with loneliness as her closest companion. There were doctor's visits she attended alone, ultrasounds she watched with bittersweet awe, and baby books she read in the dead of night, because sleep didn't come easily. The image of Liam with another woman never left her. Every time she tried to rationalize it, to tell herself he perhaps truly was innocent, the pain sharpened. She didn't want explanations anymore. She wanted peace. When the twins were born, two perfect boys with dark brown hair and crystalline blue eyes, she named them Ethan and Leo. She gave them both her surname. No middle names, no trace of the man who had vanished from their lives before they even drew a breath. They were hers, entirely. And yet, no matter how far she fled, Liam Thorne remained a man, whispered about by the world. He was everywhere, in headlines, in commercials, in interviews speaking of innovation and vision, never once mentioning the woman he'd left behind, or the children he didn't know he had. Olivia silenced every mention of him. She stopped looking at magazines, stopped watching tech news. But sometimes, late at night, she wondered if he ever felt something was missing. That somewhere, two boys who looked just like him were learning to laugh, to walk, to live. Without him, she told herself she didn't need him, and most days she believed it. But the truth, buried under all the layers of strength and silence, was that a part of her still remembered who he had been before the lie, before the betrayal, the man she had loved, the man she had trusted enough to carry a future within her. But that man was gone, and she had to become strong enough not to look back. Life in the quiet coastal town of Seabreeze Cove moved at half the pace of London. But for Olivia, it was exactly what she needed. The salty air, the rhythm of the tides, and the lack of questions gave her something she hadn't felt in months: control. She knew no one when she arrived, and that anonymity became her shield. She rented a small, weather-beaten cottage on the outskirts of town, close enough to the market, but far enough from neighbors. The walls were thin, the heater unreliable, and the roof creaked with every storm. But it was hers, a place to disappear, to heal, and to prepare for what was coming. Her pregnancy advanced in a haze of quiet resilience. Olivia had never imagined facing it alone, but as the days turned into weeks, she adapted. She learned to manage the fatigue while working from home, balancing freelance design projects with prenatal vitamins and endless reading. She researched everything obsessively: natural births, baby sleep patterns, feeding schedules, because planning gave her something to hold on to. She didn't have Liam, but she had knowledge, and that made her feel less afraid. The first time she heard both heartbeats during an ultrasound, she wept, not because she was scared, but because in that moment, loneliness gave way to something entirely different. Awe. They were two tiny lives. She hadn't expected twins, and the idea of raising two children without support was overwhelming. But she also felt a kind of electric joy. It meant she wouldn't be truly alone. As her belly grew, she began to talk to them. At night, she would lie on her old sofa and whisper to the tiny beings she hadn't yet met. She told them stories of her childhood, about her love for art, music, and the stars. She never mentioned their father, not once. She convinced herself they didn't need to know, that their world would be complete, even without a missing piece. When labor came, it was long and brutal. Olivia had no one in the waiting room, no one pacing the hallways with worry, no one to hold her hand as pain racked her body like lightning. But she pushed through with every ounce of strength she had hoarded in her soul. When Ethan arrived, he let out a sharp, defiant cry that echoed through the room. Moments later, Leo arrived in silence, his tiny chest rising and falling with the calm of someone older than his minutes. The nurses smiled and called them miracle boys. Olivia held both in her arms, skin to skin, and in that moment, she knew her life would never again belong only to her. The first few months blurred into each other. Sleepless nights, 3 a.m. feedings, lullabies sung between yawns and tears. Ethan was restless, always kicking, curious, impossible to keep still. He loved trucks, dogs, and music, and he'd sing at the top of his lungs even if he didn't know the words. Leo was gentle and slow to cry, always observing his brother with wide, thoughtful eyes. Olivia kept a journal where she wrote everything: The milestones, the fears, the funny things they did. It became her way of recording a story only she witnessed. But there were hard days, too. Days when the isolation felt crushing. Days when both children were sick, and she had to dash between their cribs, a thermometer in one hand and cool compresses in the other. There were moments when she stared at her phone, tempted to look him up, to see his face, if only for a second. But she never allowed herself to type his name. The temptation to reach out was always crushed by the memory of that night, of how quickly he had smiled at another, of how quickly he had become a stranger. And yet, Liam's absence was everywhere. In the questions the pediatrician asked about family history, in the blank space on the birth certificate, in the fact that only she had to decide everything about their future. Still, she bore it. For them. Over time, the town became familiar. The woman at the bakery always saved Olivia an extra cinnamon roll on Fridays. The elderly man who ran the hardware store gave her a used space heater when he learned she had twins. She wasn't close to anyone, but she was no longer invisible. She became the brave young mother with the beautiful boys. No one asked about their father. No one needed to. Everyone assumed what she allowed them to assume. When the boys turned 2, she threw a small party in the backyard. Just balloons, cupcakes she baked herself, and a playlist of soft acoustic songs they liked to dance to. Ethan ran in circles chasing bubbles. Leo tried to stack plastic blocks on a folding chair. Olivia watched them, kneeling on the grass, and realized something simple and devastating. They were enough, and yet a part of her still carried the story she had buried, the love she once had, the betrayal she never got to resolve, and the truth she had never dared to tell. Because no matter how much she tried to erase Liam from her life, she couldn't erase him from their faces. Every time Ethan raised an eyebrow like him, or Leo squinted his eyes when he was concentrating, Olivia felt the echo of a man who had no idea what he had left behind. But she never said a word. Not yet. It could never be avoided, because her sons deserved a life without ghosts, and she had finally built one. By the time Ethan and Leo turned 3, Olivia had developed a rhythm that, though exhausting, made her feel powerful in a way she had never known. Her days began before the sun and ended long after the boys had fallen asleep. Each morning she made them oatmeal with sliced bananas, combed their soft brown hair, and listened to their tiny voices debate which color socks to wear. It was chaotic and tender, and every detail mattered. She had become the kind of mother she never thought she'd have to be, present for every second, even when her body craved rest, and her mind spun with worries she couldn't say aloud. Ethan had become a whirlwind of energy, always bouncing from one activity to the next, shouting questions, pointing out the obvious, as if he'd discovered it for the first time. He loved trucks, dogs, and music, and he'd sing at the top of his lungs, even if he didn't know the words. Leo, in contrast, was quiet and observant, often opting to watch his brother from a distance before joining in. He was gentle with animals and people alike, with a thoughtful gaze that made Olivia wonder what he was thinking. She often said they were night and day, but they were both born under the same storm of love and pain. She couldn't imagine one without the other. Their bond was unbreakable. Even when they fought, they made up in minutes. If Ethan scraped his knee, Leo would run to get a Band-Aid. If Leo couldn't reach a toy, Ethan would drag a chair across the room without being asked. Sometimes they spoke their own language, half words, half glances, and Olivia often felt like she was watching a tiny universe that had formed between them, one she had the honor to orbit. Work was constant, but never easy. Olivia took on freelance projects at night while the boys slept, designing logos and websites for small businesses and local artists. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, put food on the table, and allowed her to stay home with the twins during the day. She sacrificed everything for that freedom: sleep, comfort, social life. But it was worth it. They were worth it. Still, even in the quiet security of the life she had built, there were moments of sharp uncertainty. Sometimes, when the boys played outside, Olivia would sit on the porch and stare down the street, half expecting a black town car or a familiar figure to appear. She'd shake off the thought. Liam didn't know where she was, and even if he did, he hadn't come looking for her. That was the truth she clung to. He had made his choice. She had made hers. Then came the photo. It happened one warm spring morning at the farmer's market. Olivia had taken the boys to pick out strawberries and sunflowers, something they did every Saturday. A local photographer was documenting mothers in their natural habitat, taking candid shots of families as part of a feel-good blog project. Olivia didn't think much of it when he asked to snap a few pictures. She politely agreed, took Ethan's hand in one and Leo's in the other, and laughed as they tugged her towards a giant pile of fresh bread. The photographer thanked her and handed her a business card, promising to tag her if the photos were used. She forgot about it almost immediately, but a week later, her face was everywhere. The blog post had gone viral. Single mother of twins steals hearts at Seabreeze Cove. Market. Comments flooded in. Praise, questions, speculation. People wanted to know who she was, where she came from, how she managed it all alone. Someone reposted it on Twitter, then Instagram, then national parenting forums. Olivia tried to ignore it. She told herself it would die down. But the photo, her laughing in the sun with two boys who mirrored Liam's eyes, now floated across the internet like a flare. She didn't sleep for 3 nights after it happened. The possibility of being found, of her past catching up to her, gnawed at every corner of her mind. She checked her email compulsively. Then she hated herself for doing so. On the 4th day, it happened. She opened her inbox and froze. A new message. No subject. Sender. Liam Thorne. She stared at it for almost 10 minutes before clicking. There were only 3 words inside. Olivia. It's me. No explanation. No accusations. No anger. Just a presence, reappearing in her world like a ghost who suddenly remembered he had once been real. She didn't reply. She couldn't. Her hands trembled. Her breath caught in her throat. The children were napping. The house was silent. But inside her chest, everything screamed. Liam had found her, and nothing would ever be the same. Olivia didn't open the email again for 3 days. She read it once, those 3 simple words, and then she let it sit in her inbox like a ticking clock. She went through her routine, dressing the boys, feeding them, going for walks. But something had cracked in the calm she had so carefully built. She couldn't stop wondering how he had found her. If he had seen the photo himself, or if someone else had sent it to him. And most of all, she wondered why, after all this time, he was reaching out now. On the 3rd night, after the boys were asleep, tangled together in their small shared bed, Olivia sat in the dark at her kitchen table. The overhead light flickered softly as the cursor blinked on a blank reply screen. She didn't know what she wanted to say. A part of her wanted to scream, to demand answers, to hurl every painful memory at him in jagged shards. Another part of her wanted to delete the email and pretend it had never arrived. But the part she couldn't ignore was the one that whispered the truth. He had a right to know, not to claim, not to erase the past, but to know. Her reply was brief. I don't know why you're writing, but they exist. They're beautiful, and they're mine. I don't need anything from you, I just need you to understand that you didn't give them anything. Until now. She didn't expect a reply. She sent it and closed the laptop, as if shutting it could seal off the part of her heart that had just broken open again. The silence that followed felt heavier than any words. But Liam did reply. The next day, I don't want to take anything from you. I just want to see them. Or you. I've made mistakes. But please, let me at least explain what happened. Olivia stared at the screen for a long time. She remembered his voice, his laugh, the way he used to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear when she was too stubborn to cry. She also remembered the betrayal, the other woman, the unanswered calls, the silence that followed. And now, here he was, asking for a conversation he should have fought for years ago. She didn't reply that day, but the following week, she told him to come to Seabreeze Cove if he was serious. She didn't give an address. No promises. Just a place and a time. The park by the water. Friday at noon. She didn't know if he'd come. She didn't know if she truly wanted him to. Friday arrived with a half-cloudy sky and an ocean wind that carried the scent of salt and seaweed. Olivia wore a sweater and jeans with her hair pulled back in a low braid. She left the boys at home with a sitter. This moment, this confrontation, was not for them. Not yet. When she saw him walking down the path, something in her chest twisted. Liam looked older, not aged in a bad way, but changed. His face was sharper, his eyes more sunken, as if time had worn away the perfect exterior he had always maintained. He wasn't wearing a suit, just dark jeans and a jacket, hands in his pockets, shoulders slightly hunched. He looked like a man who had been waiting for this moment far longer than she had. "Hello," he said when he reached her, his voice low, as if trying not to break the fragile air between them. Olivia didn't speak at first. She studied him, unsure if she was looking at the man who had once made her feel invincible, or the man who had let her disappear without a fight. "I saw the photo," he said. "At first I thought it couldn't be you, but then I saw the boys." "They're not just boys," she replied. "They're your sons." He closed his eyes for a moment, as if the weight of those words pressed down on him like gravity. "I didn't know. Liam, I swear, if you had known..." "If you had known?" She cut him off. Her voice rose. "What? You would have stayed. You would have fought. Because the man I saw with another woman that night didn't look confused, Liam. He looked happy." He seemed stunned. "That woman was my sister. I didn't get a chance to tell you. I didn't want her addiction to be all over the media, so I kept it private. I was going to propose to you that week. The ring was already in my pocket when you left." Olivia felt her stomach drop. The words hit her like cold water, and for a second, she forgot how to breathe. "No, don't say that." "It's the truth," he said. "But I didn't come after you. That's my fault. I thought you left because you didn't want the life I was building. I thought maybe you never truly wanted to stay." She turned away, tears pricking her eyes. Not because she believed him immediately, but because a part of her had always feared there was more to the story. And now, here it was, spilling out into the cold wind of a place she had once considered safe. "Why now?" she asked. "Why come back?" Liam took a step closer, but not too close. "Because I saw them. Because I realized I lost the most important thing I had, and I didn't even know it. And because I don't want them to grow up thinking their father never cared. I can't erase what I did, but I can show up now, if you let me." The wind whispered through the trees, and Olivia stood still, her heart torn between the past and the present. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know what to believe. But she knew the boys would someday ask who their father was. And when that day came, she wanted to be able to tell them that he at least tried. "I don't promise anything," she said. "But maybe, just maybe, you can meet them. One step at a time." Liam nodded, his eyes wet but firm. "One step at a time." And for the first time in years, something that had been broken began, slowly, to mend. Not with forgiveness, not yet, but with truth. And that was a beginning. Liam waited 3 days before Olivia agreed to let him meet the boys. She didn't tell Ethan and Leo much. She didn't know how. How do you explain to 3-year-olds that a man they've never met was supposed to stay, but didn't? She told them a friend was coming to visit. She rehearsed answers in her head to questions they might ask, but hoped they wouldn't. Her stomach remained in a knot all day. She arranged the meeting at the local botanical garden, a wide open space where the boys could run freely, and she wouldn't feel trapped. She didn't want them to feel like they were being scrutinized, and she didn't want Liam to think for a moment that this would be easy or casual. This was the most important moment of their lives so far, even if the boys didn't understand it yet. Liam arrived early, dressed simply in a soft gray sweater and dark jeans, and held a small toy truck in one hand and a storybook in the other. Olivia wasn't sure if the gifts were a good idea or not, but she was grateful he didn't come empty-handed. She stood aside as he waited nervously near the entrance, checking his watch, looking around like a man trying not to panic. When the boys arrived with her, Ethan immediately ran toward the flowers, shouting something about finding a butterfly. Leo, more cautious, clung to Olivia's leg, eyeing Liam with quiet curiosity. Liam didn't rush them. He knelt down and waited until they came closer. He didn't speak immediately. He just offered the truck to Ethan and held out the book to Leo. Ethan, true to form, took the truck without hesitation and began to zoom it across the gravel. Leo stared at the book, then slowly walked forward and took it in his small hands. Liam looked at Olivia for permission. She gave him a small nod, and then he spoke. "Hello," he said softly. "I'm Liam. I'm very happy to meet you." Ethan didn't reply, too focused on making engine noises. But Leo nodded once, serious and quiet, and said, "Hello." That was the beginning. They walked through the gardens together for over an hour. Liam kept pace with the boys, not taking control, not pushing conversation. He asked what their favorite colors were, if they liked dinosaurs or space more, what songs they liked to sing. Ethan answered every question with delight, while Leo often waited, then added his own thoughts with a quiet wisdom. Olivia watched it unfold, with a mixture of disbelief and cautious hope. This was the man who had missed every birthday, every fever, every first word. And yet, he was here, present, listening. As they sat on a bench beneath a wisteria vine, Ethan climbed onto the backrest and pretended to be a pirate. Liam offered to read to Leo, who was already poring over the pages of the book he'd brought. Olivia sat beside them, but didn't speak much. It wasn't necessary. Her eyes never left the scene. A man who had once disappeared, gently reading to a child, who didn't even know what a father was supposed to be. When it was time to leave, Ethan said, "Are you coming to our house next time?" Olivia's heart stopped for a moment, but Liam looked at her before replying. "That's up to your mom," he said, "but I'd like to." Leo looked at him. "Do you know how to make pancakes?" Liam chuckled softly. "Not very well, but I can learn." That night, after the boys were asleep, Olivia sat on her porch, a blanket wrapped around her legs, and stared out into the darkness. Liam had walked them home, but he didn't stay. He thanked her, said he wouldn't call unless she said it was okay. He left her with no pressure, no promises, just the feeling that something might finally be changing. She thought of how easy it would be to fall back into the past, to imagine him holding her as he used to, whispering apologies and dreams they once shared. But she wasn't the woman he'd left behind. She was stronger now, and she wasn't doing this for nostalgia. She was doing it for Ethan and Leo, for the chance that they could know a version of their father who wasn't perfect, but was present. That, more than anything, was what they deserved. And if Liam kept showing up, not with grand gestures, but with quiet consistency, maybe, just maybe, he could become someone worth forgiving. Not for the past, but for the future they could still build. In the following weeks, Liam began to show up every Saturday morning like clockwork. At first, Olivia kept things guarded. She never left him alone with the boys. She always stayed close, observing with quiet intensity. But little by little, as she watched his steady patience, his gentle attentiveness, and the sincere effort in his eyes, she began to let her guard down, piece by piece. The boys, however, needed no convincing. Ethan quickly bonded with Liam, as if he'd always been there, dragging him into imaginary games, insisting he build Lego towers and chase them around the backyard like a dinosaur. Leo took longer. He'd sit nearby, but rarely touched him, watching Liam with silent eyes, as if waiting to see if this new person would also disappear. But even he began to approach, especially when Liam would read to them, or sit cross-legged on the floor, sketching ridiculous stick figures at their command. Olivia began to see a side of Liam she had never known. He was softer now, stripped of the arrogance and image he used to wear like armor. He didn't talk about his company, unless asked. He never pulled out his phone when he was with the boys. He didn't apologize or try to make grand statements. He simply showed up, week after week, on time, sleeves rolled up, and an expression that said he knew how much he had to prove. One Saturday afternoon, as Liam helped Olivia wash paint-covered hands in the kitchen sink, Ethan suddenly turned to him and said, "You can come on Wednesdays too, not just Saturdays." Olivia froze, unsure how to respond, but Liam just smiled and looked at her for permission. She gave him a small nod. From that week on, Wednesdays became their second ritual. He'd bring takeout and play with the boys until bedtime, often helping Olivia clean up afterward. They never talked much about the past. The unspoken agreement between them was clear. The past was heavy and sharp, but the present had to be gentle enough to build trust. One evening, as they folded laundry together in the living room, Olivia finally asked the question that had been on the edge of her heart for weeks. "What made you stop looking?" Liam paused, his hands buried in a pile of tiny socks. "I didn't know how," he said quietly. "After you left, I thought you didn't want to be found. I thought you hated me so much that disappearing was your way of telling me it was all over. And honestly, I didn't know if I deserved to find you." He looked at her then, his eyes full of something that felt like regret, soaked in truth. "But I should have tried harder. I should have known you wouldn't have just left without a reason." Olivia didn't reply immediately. The boys' laughter echoed from their room down the hall. She thought of the nights she'd spent rocking them to sleep, the birthdays she'd planned alone, the loneliness she'd fought off like an illness. "You missed so much," she whispered. "You missed everything." Liam nodded slowly. "I know, and I'll never get that time back. But if you let me, I want to be here for everything that comes next." Their connection didn't revert to romantic. Not yet. But something deeper was forming between them. A quiet partnership rooted in parenting, in redemption, in the slow rebuilding of something that had once shattered. Olivia saw how the boys blossomed with him around. Ethan became more confident. Leo began to open up, to smile more. They'd ask for him when he wasn't there. They'd draw pictures of their family that now included 4 stick figures instead of 3. One night, after the boys were asleep, Olivia walked into the living room and found Liam asleep on the sofa, arms crossed, head tilted, a crayon still tucked behind his ear from story time. She didn't wake him. She sat across from him and just watched him for a while, realizing that, for the first time in years, The house felt full. Not noisy or chaotic, just full. Complete in a way she hadn't allowed herself to believe was possible. She didn't know what the future held, didn't know if she and Liam would ever be what they once were. But she knew her children were happier, that she no longer carried the weight alone, and that Liam, for all his failures, was trying. Every single day. Sometimes, redemption doesn't come with a grand gesture. Sometimes, it tiptoes in through routine, through quiet apologies made with actions instead of words. And Olivia was learning that maybe, just maybe, second chances didn't have to be loud to be real. By the time autumn arrived in Seabreeze Cove, with crisp air and leave turning golden on the hills, Liam had become a pillar in their lives. Not just weekends or midweek dinners. He was there for school projects, doctor's appointments, bedtime stories, and early morning pancake requests. The boys now called him Dad, without hesitation. They said it naturally, like breathing. Liam never asked them to, never corrected them. But the first time Leo whispered, "Dad, come look," while building a block tower, Olivia had seen Liam freeze, just for a moment, as if the word had taken his breath away in the best possible way. Olivia had watched it all unfold slowly, cautiously, but steadily. She didn't want to fall into old patterns or be swept away by the comfort of familiarity. Too much had happened for that, but over time, the weight of what she'd carried alone for so long began to ease. She no longer felt the constant sting of resentment. Instead, something softer grew. Acceptance, understanding, perhaps even the earliest stages of forgiveness. Not because Liam had asked for it, but because he had earned it. Every night, every school-run morning, every quiet moment where he chose presence over pride, stitched a new version of him that she could begin to trust. Then, one snowy December afternoon, as the first real snowfall blanketed the town, and the boys danced barefoot in the living room to Christmas music, Liam asked Olivia if they could talk alone. They stood by the window as the twins twirled on the rug, oblivious to anything outside their joy. Liam pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Her breath hitched, but when he opened it, it wasn't a ring. Inside was a simple silver chain with two small engraved pendants. Ethan and Leo. He held it out to her. "I'm not asking for anything," he said, his voice firm but soft. "Not yet. I just wanted to give you something to say thank you. For them, for the chance to be their father, and for not closing the door completely, even when you had every right to." Olivia looked at the necklace. Her fingers trembled slightly. She said nothing at first. She just took it, gently. That moment didn't need romance or declarations. It needed truth, and she already had it. By spring, the small house began to feel smaller. The boys were growing fast. Olivia and Liam began quietly, together, to look for something more permanent. A house with a backyard and more light. Not a mansion, not a statement, just a home. They found one on the outskirts of town. It needed work. The floors creaked and the kitchen tiles were cracked. But the yard bloomed with wildflowers, and the view overlooked a gentle hill. It felt right, like a place where new stories could be written. Moving day was chaotic, with the boys running among boxes, arguing over which room would have the space-themed wallpaper. Liam spent the day lifting furniture and letting Ethan direct where everything should go, while Olivia unpacked the kitchen and tried not to cry every time she opened a drawer and saw how far they had come. That night, after the boys were asleep, tucked into their new beds, Olivia and Liam sat in the backyard under a string of temporary lights. There were still boxes everywhere, tools scattered across the deck. But it didn't matter. The air was warm. The silence was peaceful. Olivia turned to him and said, unplanned, "I think I'm ready." Liam looked at her, unsure if she meant the house, their life, or something more. "Ready for what?" he asked softly. She smiled, not the cautious way, but something real, full of light. "To stop pretending I'm not still in love with you." He said nothing at first. He just took her hand and kissed her fingers. Then he said, "I never stopped." They didn't rush. They didn't announce anything. But from that night on, they lived not just as co-parents, not just as two people healing separately, but as a family. A real one. Messy and human and whole. And years later, when Ethan and Leo stood on the stage at their high school graduation and thanked their mom and dad for being their best team, Olivia and Liam sat in the front row, side by side, hands clasped. Not because everything had been perfect, but because they had chosen, again and again, not to give up. Not on each other. Not on the boys. Not on love. And that choice made all the difference.